What is going on, my family? Your boy Demetrius is back with another Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown video. Actually, with this video here, it does not really pertain to Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown per se, but it does involve Virtua Fighter in general. And what I'm talking about here is a question that was asked by a regular on VFDC. The person that was asking this question is, of course, Master Poe. And a lot of people already know Master Poe is a regular on VFDC. Some say he's a troll, but I don't really think about it like that. You know what I'm saying? But Master Poe is a regular on VFDC. I don't look at him as a troll because he doesn't have any trollish tendencies. But he did ask a very interesting question when it came to Virtua Fighter. Now, hardcore Sega fans, classic Sega fans, such as myself and a lot of other guys, pretty much already know the answer to this question. But I'm just going to go ahead and share this and answer the question in this video, because if you don't know, you're going to know at the end of this video, because it is kind of an important question. And I think a lot of people really do need to know the history of Virtua Fighter and, you know, Sega in general and all of that stuff. So the question that he asked is Virtua Fighter more important to Sega than it is to the fans? And the easy answer to that question is yes. Virtua Fighter meant the world to Sega, especially Sega of Japan. Now, we got to go all the way back to the early 90s. Do y'all all remember the game Eternal Champions? I know I've spoken of Eternal Champions a few times when I've made Sega videos. Eternal Champions was one of those titles that always came up in my conversations. And the reason why we don't see a game like Eternal Champions anymore is because of Sega's decision to make Virtua Fighter the flagship over that game. Sega of Japan overruled Sega USA to make Virtua Fighter the flagship, and that is the reason why we don't see Eternal Champions anymore. Eternal Champions, a lot of people don't realize, Eternal Champions was huge. That game was huge. It was selling big. Eternal Champions was competing with Mortal Kombat. That's how huge it was. And after the Sega CD version, Eternal Champions just disappeared around 1995, the same time Virtua Fighter 2 blew up. And that was no coincidence. Y'all really need to think about that. It was no coincidence when Eternal Champions disappeared the same year Virtua Fighter 2 blew up. And that is when Sega was like, okay, we want Virtua Fighter to be the flagship fighting game. And they did not want a game like Eternal Champions running neck and neck with Virtua Fighter. And this is why Virtua Fighter is what it is today, because it meant a lot to Sega. Virtua Fighter definitely meant a lot to Sega and also its fans. And Eternal Champions wasn't the only fighting game. There were other fighting games such as Fighting Vipers. This is why we don't see Fighting Vipers anymore, because they do not want that game being the flagship over Virtua Fighter. So Sega definitely pushed and advertised Virtua Fighter to be #1 because they cared for the game. This was the game that they wanted to represent their fighting games. And I think Sega at the time did a great job. The decision, it was a good decision, because I'm kind of biased because Virtua Fighter is my most favorite video game of all time. So I'm going to go with the decision being good, even though I love Eternal Champions. But, you know, when Virtua Fighter came out, hey, it automatically became my most favorite fighting game, and it automatically became my most favorite video game of all time. You know, Eternal Champions, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, it all went to the back seat for Virtua Fighter. That's how much I love this game. But, you know, that's the decision, and that's what happened back then. That's why the question is, he says, did Virtua Fighter mean as much to Sega? Yes, it did, because that is the reason why you don't see other Sega fighting games today. It's because of them pushing Virtua Fighter the way that they did. Now, there's actually a part 2 to this. The Sega back then and the Sega of today are two completely different Segas. I have to say this. The Sega that we know today is just a apartment duplex company full of clowns. I'm just keeping it real. It is nothing like the Sega back then. The Sega back then was full of legends, full of talented game designers, game developers. We don't have that now in today's current Sega. Today's current Sega is just full of clowns, full of busted refugees from other companies that are out of business. The Sega of today is just completely just whack. You know, Sega is just a name right now. But the Sega back then was legendary. Nobody was touching Sega back then. I don't care. Sega was untouchable back then. Their ideas, their infrastructure, Sega was doing the damn thing. So I had to put that out there. So like I said, there's two different Segas. But the Sega back then, they knew what they were doing back then by making Virtua Fighter their flagship title. But it ain't got nothing to do with the Sega of today. And that's why I said this is the part 2, because it kind of seems like he doesn't know that history. And that's why he asked that question. And that is fine. So now he knows there are two different types of Segas. So yes, Virtua Fighter meant a lot to Sega. That Sega, the Sega in that time, yes, it meant a lot to Sega because they pushed it so. But the Sega of today, man, like I said, the Sega of today is just full of clowns. Who knows what the fuck them motherfuckers are doing over there? You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that is the easy answer to that question. That's the best way that I can sum it up. And that's the best way that it can be answered. And like I said, Virtua Fighter definitely meant a lot to Sega, especially Sega of Japan. And that is the reason why it was pushed so hard by Sega, because this is what Sega wanted. They wanted Virtua Fighter to be #1 on their fighting game chart. So it meant a lot. Hopefully Master Poe sees this, and hopefully he understands what I'm talking about when I say that there's two different types of Segas. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe for more of this Virtua Fighter talk and the hottest Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown action on the internet, period. Make sure y'all stay safe. I will hit y'all back in the next video. God bless. I am out. Peace.